Welcome back to another exciting episode of Revenue Roadmap. We have an incredible guest today. I will let Brandon introduce himself and his awesome firm in Arkansas. But if you are listening to us in your car, Brandon is not your traditional buttoned up, suited up lawyer. He has a much more relaxed approach, which I personally love. Brandon, thanks so much for coming and joining us today. We would love to learn a little bit about you, hear your origin story, and the premise of this podcast is to help other law firm owners grow their firm. Lessons learned, key insights. So we're going to stay around those topics today as we jump in.
I'm Brandon Haubert. I'm a lawyer in Little Rock, Arkansas. WH Law practices primarily what I consider like blue collar or consumer-based law. So a couple of ways we got there. One, when I became a lawyer, I did what everybody wanted to do, and I noticed that went after people with money, which is not a bad thing. I'm not saying that's bad, but what I did notice is they all wanted my cell phone number, and the only way I could make more money was to work more hours, right? Like because they also did not necessarily want people that worked for me to work for them. They wanted to hire me, and they wanted me to do everything. It was kind of difficult. So I kind of started thinking about a different approach, and so I started thinking about what I hated about practicing law and trying to fix those things, and kind of going through that and tried a bunch of different things. I tried flat fees. I've tried all kinds of payment plans, all kinds of stuff. But really what it came down to was just meeting people where they're at and thinking about what I would want if I was hiring somebody and what that would look like, and then trying to implement that. I guess I'll say this and then I'll shut up so everybody else can talk. But one thing that the moment for me that was like the aha moment was I have no patience, like zero. Ask my wife, ask my kids, they all know. But I was trying to schedule an appointment with like some other business, and I was just infuriated that I couldn't do it online. And then it dawned on me that you could not schedule an appointment online with me. And then I thought, well, okay, shit. So then a couple weeks later, I had all that figured out and fixed and implemented. But that was like the genesis of me being like, I should give people what they want, what I want from other businesses. And so we've kind of moved down that path. So that's kind of what we are and who we are. And I can talk about that with branding in a second, but I'm going to be quiet and let you guys talk.
No worries. That's really interesting. A lot of times when we do these interviews, we talk to the law firm owner who I believe is an entrepreneur, right? You're running a business. It just happens to be a law firm. And we talk to them about their transformation from I'm an attorney. I do these things for these people to now I have to run a business, and I have to get clients to come in, and I have to make payroll, and I have to do the things that a normal business does. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey from graduating law school? Did you work at a big firm, or did you start your firm right away? Give us some perspective.
No. It's okay. So I graduated law school, and I got a job offer from an insurance defense firm, which was at top of market in my area. And then I had been clerking for a guy, and he offered me a job with zero pay.
Perfect.
Yeah, he said, you can put your name on the wall, but I'm not going to pay you anything. And I asked like 20 people, lawyers, like, what should I do here? And of course, 20 people told me to take the job.
Really?
Well, yeah, because it's guaranteed money, right? Safe. Lawyers are not risky people. We all know this. And so I then decided, well, I have to go out on my own because it's, when there's no risk, there's no reward. So I did that. My goal was to beat my job offer in year one. Like I was like, if I can make more than I would have made at that job in year one, then I am successful. Like, then that is the measure of success, right? Because it's only going to go up.
Yep.
And so, so that was my win there. But and that was kind of it. So I went out on my own. The name of the firm now is WH Law. It was Wilson and Haubert because I joined a guy that was much older than me. Like I said, I'd clerked for him while I was in law school. we revolutionized a bunch of things because he's a very nice guy, very good guy. But of course, he was using an Excel spreadsheet to manage his cases and AOL email addresses. Right. So it's just a different, so we had to fix a bunch of things. And so I joined him and started off, and he was trusted me a lot, and that really helped. But we went through that and grew. It probably took us, let's see, it was a 2000. So it probably took us like 5 years, and we went from, his business was doing like 200 grand a year in revenue, and it took about 5 years, and we're starting to do about 100 grand a month. It was slow growth, and we had about 10 employees. And then he decided that he wanted to go back to what he had before, which was him and his wife just practicing law by themselves. So that, therefore, it went from Wilson and Haubert to WH Law, because there was no
point,
Wilson.
Just cut you off. That inflection moment, I think, is so pivotal to entrepreneurs and law firm owners alike, in that, like, you get used to the way things are, and you get comfortable, and to push past that, to actually grow, takes effort and friction. And sometimes people say they're ready, they're along for the ride, and then you start to go down this path and they're not. How did you push through that? Did you just say, well, I got to do it, so it is what it is?
Yeah, I mean, it was an amicable divorce, of course. Like, it was funny because it's the differences, right? Like, I was like, well, I get the website. He's like, I don't care about the website. I get the phone number. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'll put a new phone number on the website. People will call me. Right. Because it's like the mindset, right? He's like, this phone number, like, nobody uses the Yellow Pages. It's fine. But it was just different, like, when we saw it stuff. Because that's one thing too. Like, I guess I'll say that, like, when we first started out, one thing I did was I poured a lot of energy into the website and SEO, which for a long time I was doing by myself because I had plenty of time, not that many cases. So, I was doing a lot of things myself.
Wow.
Yeah. So I learned a lot about, like, the digital marketing side of it. But so we had, like, our website, it's not like huge, but we have, I think at that time we probably had 200 or 300 clicks a day from Google, which is like, and I know if I have that, like, I shall survive. Right? Like, it's not, you may not be killing it, but somebody's going to hire you if you're doing everything else right. And so we kind of went through there, and then it took like, and so then, like, when that happened, we were down to about 5 employees, and then I think it took us like within like 18 months we had like 40 employees.
Wow.
Because it was like I had nobody to disagree with, and so that kind of happened in that direction. And then, of course, COVID hit and everything went to shit. So there was that. But so that's kind of how that all happened.
Would you think in the growth journey, would you do it differently? So it sounds like you went from 5 to 40 really quickly. Like, how did that? What were some, like, lessons learned for you guys?
We added some practice areas, right? And then, like, into one thing that happens a lot with law firms, right? Like, I think this is a thing. A lot of law firms want, like, the lawyer's main goal is to take the money out of the business. Right. And so there's not a whole lot of money to put in the business. And so just that different of, like, the goal is not to take the money out. The goal is to, like, pour it back in and take way more out down the road. It was like a, different thing. So we added a lot of people, more aggressive in advertising. Because that's another thing too, is like, when people want to take money out of the business, they don't care to advertise. They don't care to invest in anything. So it makes it very difficult to do anything. But that was basically the difference, right? Trying to grow it, and invested in technology heavier, automation, started looking at things, like, started literally critiquing our intake process, saying, like, would this piss me off if this happened to me? And, like, okay, let's not do that. Like, just the things that lawyers are very bad at, right? Like responding to emails. So it was just like, and meeting people where they were, right? Like, I've never had a billboard. I'm not saying they're bad. I have some great ideas that would probably stir up all kinds of fuss if I ever did them. But like, doing a lot more digital, a lot more SEO, PPC, Facebook, stuff like that, where people would, and doing not normal ads. Does that make, like, and nothing crazy, like, I mean, we did some fun stuff, like, one year everybody got mad at us because we gave away a free divorce for Valentine's Day. That was, it was amazing how many husbands and wives entered the competition. I've thought about stuff like that, but we live in a we live in the South, the religious South. So the one thing I've never done, because my wife tells me I can't, was I was going to give away a free paternity action for spring break, but she said that was too much.
You push a lot on the edges, it sounds like, and like
Yeah.
we did some similar stuff at Sterling. And how did you help your team work through not being like everybody else? Because that was one of the challenges that was really difficult for us, because it's like we're drawing attention like we want to, but not everybody likes to have attention pointed at them if it isn't like
all positive,
perfect and prestigious. And it's like the point is, like, they have an opinion, they know us.
Right. Yeah, it's like love me or hate me, just remember me.
Yeah,
right. Like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So there's been some of that, right? But of course, most of the people, I think it's once you start doing that, it's easier because the people that come ask you for a job are not offended, or they're more in line with that kind of thing. It's interesting though. We're like, so that it also causes some interesting perceptions, right? And I'll say this: like at one point, my wife said something, and I was talking about litigating a case or whatever, and she's like, she said something about like us not being litigious, and I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, you guys aren't always like. She goes, I was like, no, like we're litigious as shit. We just don't do the lawyer thing. Right. Like, and other lawyers, if we call and we're like, hey, this is what it is. And they're like, no, we're like, okay. Like, we don't get into we don't send you 22-page letters explaining everything. They're just like, okay. And you're like, well, I'm like, I'll see you in court. That's fine. Like, that was the deal. The deal is off. Let's go. Right. And so it's funny though, but not being loud, she actually thought like we weren't litigious. I was like, oh, we're super litigious. Like, we just don't talk about it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
For sure. But it's very similar to how we think, because it's like there's no reason that we need to expel more energy into the marketplace and like create more work for ourselves. It's like, okay, cool. Let's just go do this thing.
And so like as far as the branding goes, I guess like and kind of how all this fit in, right? It says so our office is always pretty relaxed. Right. Now we've had some battles like all places, right? Where it's like we're relaxed and people show up to work and you're like, can't do that. That is not okay. And which is a hard thing because I don't want to be, but you're like also like, hey, this is not a gym. And then kind of what happened was like people would show up to our office and they would think they were at the wrong place, right? Because they would walk into our office and like it's glass and concrete and it's bright. And so they would not think it was a lawyer's office. And like nobody's in suits. So, and kind of my thing was like people were seeing who we were in ads and online and then showing up to our office, liking what they saw, but being surprised by it. So that kind of would be like, well, we are putting the wrong stuff out in the world. So that's kind of where we moved into
using it as a differentiator, really.
Right. Yeah. It's easy to do because we're not making anything up. It's just who we are. So it's, that makes it simpler. But in sheer honesty, I went out on my own. So I did have to fake it until I made it. Like I did have to wear a suit every day, for a while and look the part until people actually believed I knew what I was doing. So there's always that.
It seems like you really have been like you're a pioneer when it comes to sales and marketing. And I think we talked to a lot of law firm owners who are totally freaked out by sales and marketing, right? They just want to be a lawyer and they want to do great work and they want to serve their clients. How did you overcome some of that uncertainty, or did you have a background in marketing or what?
No, I can
figure this out.
I have a degree in marketing, which is, I think we all know, not of any real value. I have a bachelor's degree in marketing and management. Right, which doesn't really teach you that much about marketing. No, for me, it was like, well, there was a couple things, right? Like the number one reason that lawyers don't make money is client acquisition, right? So if you fix it, you're fine. Because when you think about it, it's what you just said, like everybody be freaked out about it. Like lawyers know how to work cases. Lawyers can work cases. I can hire lawyers to work cases. I can't hire lawyers to get me clients.
Right.
So there's a lot of it's the lever you can pull that brings the most value, I guess is kind of the way I look at it.
I'm going to figure it out myself as opposed to like, I'm going to hire an agency.
Agencies have a bad reputation for a reason. Not all of them are. Like I still use agencies. Like I'm not against agencies at all. Like I still use an agency to run my PPC because I don't have time to actually go do it. Right. Like, and even though I guess the distinction is I ran ours at first, right. Which I'm not saying I'm at all, but I at least always understand it. But what I really did that was different, what I made and where me and agencies would fight, I wanted to see the data that I wanted to see. I didn't want to see the data that they wanted me to see because I don't actually care about impressions. I don't actually care about, like I understand, people are going to have to see impressions. Like today's world, the average person sees something like 7 to 12 times before they even like realize what they're looking at. I guess kind of my background too. I come from a super blue collar family. So like neither one of my parents have GED. Both smart people. but we fixed everything ourselves. Like that was the way the world worked, right? Like I bought my first truck from a salvage yard and then had to like rebuild the motor and rebuild the transmission and rebuild it. And then, when I turned 16, I had a big jacked up Chevy truck on 36 Super Swampers that I just had to build myself, right? Which is fine. But like that's so figuring something out and like solving a technical problem does not. So that was helpful, right? And to share the true experience, which I love my dad to death, but like this is literally how I learned to build a motor. My dad was, like, hey, I want to build this tonight. And I was like, fine, get everything together. I cleaned off a table, stacked all the parts on there, got everything ready. I was like, Dad, I'm ready. And he's like, all right. And he dropped a Chilton's manual on the table and left. That was my, so
Good luck.
Yeah, that was how he was. And it was funny because I asked him at one point, we were in a conversation where no nice words were being used. And I basically asked him, like, why do you do this to me? This is ridiculous. Like I see you help everybody else. And he goes, I expect more out of you. You're my son. And that's the thing though, is like with marketing, why I love digital marketing, right? And why I think it's like better than billboards or TV ads is not that it's right always, but it's a lot easier to attribute success and to track success.
Yeah.
Right. And so in that, while talking about marketing and talking about like the customer experience, right? Like we started using text messaging. Like, we'll just talk about that. All this stuff came out, like I think like Engage or all those people, you can like put the chatbot on your website and there's the live people that will talk to your clients for you, right? I tried that. It's trash. Right. Yeah. And then I tried, and then this was years and years ago, but it was like the first version of like AI, like, a bot that would answer the questions for you, right? Tried that. Trash. And I was like, okay, we'll put our own widget on there and we'll watch it. Right. Chat widget. Tried that. You have to respond so quickly, right? Yeah. So I was like, I'm just going to put a text message widget on my website. Beautiful, right? Because they send a message in, we now have their phone number, and I can reply 15 minutes later. And I am now communicating with them in the form of communication they prefer. Just doing stuff like that, just like moving that direction, because that's what everybody was doing. And so like that was kind of the first step. And then, we started using Zapier years and years ago, and then I started building all kinds of automation so that like they would fill out the form and they would instantly get a text message with the link to self-schedule, and they could self-schedule and they could get all that set up. And then we had and I can remember the first time I did all this, and like I showed up on Monday morning and there was like, 3 people's schedules were full for the next 2 days. And I was like, oh shit.
Because it's working.
Yeah. Well, like no human had to expend any energy on that.
Yeah.
Right. It was just running. And so like that was kind of, and then, but people also prefer it, right? Like they were taking care of everything themselves the way they wanted to. And
the more you talk, the more I believe that's your superpower. Being able to have the lens of like, this is how I would want it, so I'm going to build it in a way that other people would like using it too. And it's nuanced, but it's so often lost on business owners.
Yeah.
Well, the textbooks say I got to do it this way, or the program says, it's like, well, that's not how people interact.
No, yeah. Well, it's true too. And I think we're guilty of this as lawyers, right? Like, and we all know this. So, Tony, you're a lawyer, is that correct?
No, I'm not a lawyer. I manage the firm.
Is anybody on here a lawyer?
No lawyers.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, because then you guys probably won't understand this as much, but you may. I'll ask you, if you tell a lawyer a problem, what is or your issue, or however you would like to define it, what is the number one thing they want to do?
Talk about it forever.
And answer you and tell you how smart they are with all their big words and shit, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And what's the number one thing? Like, this was really an epiphany for me. Somebody calls me and says, hey, my dad died. As a lawyer, what are like the first 2 or 3 questions I ask?
Run through, yeah.
Where did he live? Did he have a will? Blah, 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 right? You know what? As a human,
instead of like,
like we forget that, right? The first thing you should say is like, man, that sucks. I'm sorry, right? Because that's what a human would do. Like that's the hard part, is like trying to wrap your head around that too. And we literally like have to train people like, hey, remember, which is why everybody hates doctors, right? They walk out and they're like, hey, yeah, there was an incident. They're dead. See you later. I'm out. Right. And it's like, we forget that to us, this is a Tuesday, and to them, this is the biggest problem in their life. Yeah. And so that kind of part of it too, right? Just what would you want if you were hiring somebody?
How do you train the rest of the team to think like that?
We literally listen to their phone calls and their conversations and critique them.
Role play.
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah.
And that's so important, you know, for a young firm owner who's listening to this. The human interaction part of dealing with clients all day, every day, being able to train your staff and not expect them to know what you know is paramount to growth.
Yes, it is. And you always forget that too. Also, well, when you talk about training staff and growth too, have you guys ever used like personality test stuff?
Oh yeah, we're huge on that here in our org.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so it's just funny, right? Because it's like literally have no patience. Like I know that now because every test I've ever taken is like you have no patience. Learn things about people, right? And so I can't do the same thing over and over again. Like that is part of which is like, you know, the entrepreneur part. Right? I gotta try something new and tinker with it and change it. But in order for somebody to have a repetitive job, they must have high patience. So like it kind of framed my brain to be like, okay, this thing about this person is going to drive me insane. But this thing about this person is absolutely necessary for them to be great at their job. So like it kind of helps you think about, okay, like I'm the problem, right? Which is like
I'm gonna be annoyed and that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay because it's literally necessary. Here's one of my interesting things. So this is, if you want to talk about lawyers, this is interesting to me. They will go to law school. They will go through college and then go to law school. They will spend all this time learning how to do something. Right. But they've never learned how to be a business owner. And they will spend zero time learning how when they get out.
Yep.
Like, you know, it's always just perplexed me. Like, if this is your job now, give it the same effort you gave your other job.
Yeah.
Right. Which is like, do you guys run on EOS or do any of that stuff?
Yeah, we run on EOS.
Yeah. So like just that stuff, like just like reading those books and trying those things and pushing those things. And you know what I mean? Like, we're going to fix all of our problems. I'm just always intrigued. Well, there's a couple things like, so I'll make fun of lawyers for a second. One is you would mock a carpenter who didn't know how to use a hammer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a lawyer that doesn't know how to use Word and Outlook is normal. And that makes no sense to me. They know how to type on it, but like to actually use it, you know, they don't know, which to me is the same as not being able to use a hammer. So like know how to use your tools, know how to use the tools of your trade, right? And the tools of our trade are rapidly changing, right? Like legal tech is a crazy, you know, business. You know, I play around with all kinds of stuff. I just think it's going to change, right? Like I've not executed this yet. I've built a couple models for funsies. I've cloned the voices of my staff to see if I can get AI to answer my phone and take all the information and put it all in my CRM for me, right? And it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's going to happen one day. Like that's going to be a thing. And then I also think, you know, I also want the same model to like be able to have text message conversations with people, extract the data, put it in the CRM and run the automations.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's where we're going. And then I think those things are beautiful because then we're having software do lower level tasks and we're able to get our humans to do higher level tasks, which actually lead to better customer satisfaction.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the misnomer around AI these days is people think, oh, it's going to take my job. No, it's going to allow you to elevate into a more productive job that's going to allow you to have more impact.
And also like automations. I think so before I talk too much about automations, this is how I describe automations because I think they're also super dangerous. I always ask people like, what would you do if you had an employee who did exactly what you said to the T, no discretion, no judgment, and just executed it no matter how ridiculous the literal interpretation was, right? And they're like, I would hate that person. Like that's an automation, right? So you got to get it right because it doesn't really it's just going to run. But I also think they're lawyers, they're just like client happiness. Hearing gets scheduled, client, like we just schedule it in our software. Client automatically gets notified of it. Client automatically gets notified and automatically gets like a link to schedule so they can schedule a hearing prep call, which makes them super happy because now they're not stressed out about, you know, I need to talk to my lawyer, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And then like they'll get automated reminders, you know, up until the hearing just to notify them. So it's stuff like that where it's just alleviate the stress. And then the people that work here are also not having to have a bunch of conversations with people who are just freaked out trying to schedule but I need to talk to like there's, because you can schedule a hearing 7 months out.
Yeah.
And you're going to get an immediate phone call about what am I supposed to do now, right?
Yep.
So just kind of like using automations to kind of help alleviate some of that stress.
This is how the process works. This is what you have to expect. I want to shift our conversation just a little bit so that we can make sure we're serving as many listeners as possible. Understanding that you went from one location to multiple locations, I'd love for you to talk us through that thought process? Why open that second location? Was it as hard opening the second one as it was the third one? And so on and so forth. I know Tony has some great stories on that too.
Well, I think it is incredibly difficult because you have a culture problem, right? Like it's hard. Like when you work with people every day and they see you in the office every day, it's much easier to kind of have your finger on the pulse of what's going on. You put some distance between you, it makes it a lot harder. So yes, I think it's incredibly difficult. But the truth is, right, like when you're doing the way I kind of look at it is like when you're doing things differently, like a new location is always good because in essence, you don't have competition, right? If there's nobody in that location doing what I'm doing, I can probably do pretty well at it.
You'd be the leader.
And so that's why I think it's a good idea, but I also think it's difficult to do. Of course, I'll say this, we did that pre-COVID. Post-COVID, I would say, I don't know, you could probably get a lot bigger geographic reach without locations, but I don't know that, you know what I mean? But does that, because people are less inclined to come in the office. And we found that across the board. I feel like pre-COVID, everybody would want to come in to hire us. And post-COVID, people don't really come in.
And they don't need to. I think that's the truth of the matter.
No, I mean, we're gonna talk on the phone. I'm gonna click some buttons. You're gonna get a text message with a fee agreement to sign. You're gonna get a text message with a link to pay, and then we're off to the races.
I think from a location perspective, from a marketing side of things, right? We believe that law firms are local businesses, and in order to show up in local markets, you have to have a physical presence, right? We also know that 42% of all local searches come from the maps. And in order to show the maps in your location. So there's a lot of marketing methodology as it relates to why you should open multiple locations. But I think what's lost on some of that is it's freaking hard, and you have to do it right, and you have to do it the right way. I think, Tony, you mentioned when we opened our second and third location at Sterling, one, we made a mistake on the geographic area and proximity to our other location, and then also you should always open two at a time, I believe was your ideology there.
Yeah, our first one didn't work. That was it's because we spent way too much time trying to figure things out that didn't matter, because we were way too focused on the one new location versus, which was literally, I don't know, 20 minutes down the street. So it wasn't really a new physical area. And then we have our primary in Menominee Falls, which I saw right outside Milwaukee. Then we opened one in Madison and in Appleton. And it really forced us to think a lot bigger. Like, what are the real problems we need to solve? Not which coffee maker do we put in the front, and what's all the like little things that like they matter, but they're actually like not the right problems a business owner needs to be thinking about solving. Who should be solving those problems is the right question. Not you focused on the signage and all of the little tiny details that actually don't move the needle. It was super interesting, and go through and mistakes we made in terms of how we picked and what we learned and all that stuff.
I can see that.
And same experience for you, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I probably had less of those problems because I'm very good at delegating because I just don't want to deal with stuff.
That whole defense thing you talked about earlier?
Yeah. So because I'm trying to think about it, but we did it. And of course, when I did it, I was cheap, right? So I was a young lawyer. This was actually funny. So like mine were not necessarily mistakes because they couldn't be. I was cheap and I was a young lawyer, and so I was not a threat. Right. So like I actually just rented space from other lawyers. And so, I'd be like, hey man, can I just like put an office here? I won't ever be here. Like somebody might drop some stuff off with your receptionist, just send it to me. I'll pay you like $100 a month.
Nice.
And they're like, fine, that's fine. I'm like, I might need your conference room every now and then. I'm like, that's fine. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Right. So I kind of did that, and that kind of started the process.
How many of those did you do? Like and
3.
What was the order? Nice. Well,
Yeah.
Kind of all at the same time, or?
Yeah, just as we were like, yeah, let's just go in these, the towns around us. And I still have some of them. I have offices that I haven't been to in 5 years. But the manned office, which was much different and much more difficult. And even that, like, we opened one, shrunk it just down to one person, then tried to grow it again. Now we shrunk it again. It's like, because it's hard to get, because the problem is I will say the thing is, which, somebody literally needs to be in that office. Like somebody from this office needs to be in that office a lot. Mm-hmm. And if you get too busy to do that, that office starts kind of feeling left out and falls apart in a way. Does that make sense? And because there's not, they feel like stepchildren.
Yeah. How did you guys work on bridging the cultures between the different like main hub locations that you have?
We do a lot more, like we invite them in, like a lot more firm things. We try to do that. But of course, even then, like when you do it, it's still not fair because we always do all the things at the main office.
Yeah.
Because that's where most of the people are. Right. So like, it's hard. We just have some now it's working better because we just have some, like we had one long-term employee from the home office move to the satellite office, which kind of helps. But yeah, we are still literally trying to figure it out. So I'm not saying that we have it figured out at all. So
did you guys meet a lot online or
every morning? So, and we always do it via Teams. That way we always, because that's like one thing we used to do daily huddles, but like, like 3 people would be in office and 1 person would be like on Microsoft Teams. Right. Which then it's not so, but now everybody meets on Teams, even if you're in the office next to each other or you're far away. That works too. Also, we haven't talked about this, but this is another thing when you're thinking about growth, because I used to teach law practice management at the law school, which was an interesting endeavor, trying to teach lawyers that all the things they don't think are important. Here, I'll tell you something I used to tell them that would always, and then I'll go into why I was going to bring this up. But it's something I used to always tell them. I'd be like, okay, so what are you worth when you graduate? Right. And they'd give me a number that I thought was astronomically too high. Right. And I'd say, okay, that's scenario 1. We got it. Everybody good. Everybody got your number. Great. You have been grinding it out for 2 years. You finally got an assistant, but now you're doing like 30, 35 grand a month, but it's costing you about 10, 12 a month to survive. Okay. So like you think you are in high heaven because you're making 15, 18 grand a month. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, great. You're doing good, but you're busy and you need help. So now you're going to hire an associate. How much of your 15 grand a month are you willing to give them?
Maybe like, 3.
And they're like, what? I'm like, that's the market. And they're like, but they'll be making more than me. And I was like,
yep,
it might happen, right? Like that's part of the deal. Literally, like you have to contemplate that. Anyway, I bring that up to say one thing that we've had a lot of luck with is like honestly getting good help and growing. And this has helped us also learn how to deal with remote people. We do hire international contractors.
So do we. That's been a game changer.
Yeah. So even and I'll say this to lawyers if they're listening, I just hired a lawyer in Ecuador as a paralegal, and my all-in price is $1,500 a month.
Yeah, it's crazy. And we have whole legal assistant and paralegal teams and it's amazing from a cost perspective. They're like the gratitude that you get international.
They want the job. They want the job.
Work hard.
Yes. Just for those listening,
you have to encourage them to be like, Ayla, you look really sick today. Just go rest. It's fine.
The hack that if someone's listening and they've been thinking about getting international talent for their team, we have found that you have to treat them like employees. They are humans. You are humans. Add them to your huddles. Add them to your celebrations. Yeah. The more that they feel part of the team, the more the team will gel around it. Have you found that to be the case as well, Brandon?
Yeah, we just had our Christmas party, right? And kind of to make it work better, we had our Christmas party. We have some people that couldn't come in. Some people did come in. One of the activities we did, we hired a virtual game show host, right? So the people in the office were on their phones. The people remote were on their computers, but we had teams that included remote people and office people, and so it was it wasn't the same, but they were still participating as much as anybody else.
Have you guys done you guys do leadership training and development together in terms of how to build the culture? That's one thing that we've implemented in both orgs. It's small group lessons on leadership, and you kind of get pretty raw and vulnerable about different topics, and it's all right, everybody's going to see all the broccoli in my teeth, and I'm going to see yours, and we're going to have a real conversation, and you end up with way better understanding of each other, and you can actually
we try. We we do we call them practice area leaders, right? They're in charge of, and they have a meeting every week. I don't think it's what it needs to be, but one thing that I do, which kind of trickles down to everybody else, and I've had people in leadership positions do as well. Are you guys familiar with Vistage?
Yep.
So we are I'm in Vistage, leadership people are in Vistage, and so they can actually do it outside of here as well. So that is because that's what happens in that room.
Oh, that's awesome.
So.
Yeah, Vistage is great. It's been a huge driver for our growth internally. I've to me, it's all about the group. Like, you got to be in the right group and have the right
Yeah.
facilitator. Brandon, this has been awesome. I so appreciate your time. Really enjoyed the conversation. If you had to go back to when you were teaching young lawyers, what are 2 or 3 things that if I'm just graduating law school, I really need to think about, whether I'm joining a big firm or I'm starting out on my own? Just a few points of advice for our young listeners would be awesome.
Well, I'm gonna try to do this without being too, I guess, sarcastic sounding. But I do think that one thing that like happens, right? And we've tried to train young lawyers. We've had some great ones. We've had some not so great ones. But the one thing that to me is I want them, because I'll just say that some things that I find funny, is like you have a lawyer who has paid to go to college and law school, and while they were paying somebody, they were completely willing to like stay up to midnight studying, to do all this work to make sure they were successful, right? But then when I start paying them, they want to leave at 4:45, which to me, we don't have our goal is not long hours. One reason we've done a lot of things we've done is we're trying to like literally have a work-life balance. Most people work 8 to 5 here, right? Now, the thing about being a lawyer is you don't care what your hours are. You got to do whatever the case demands, right? Yeah. And sometimes that is going to suck.
Yep.
And that's just part of the deal. But to put that effort in, to put the same effort in that they put into law school into like the first 2 or 3 years, because I believe if it gives them that springboard that makes them astronomically better, right? Because, and I'll say this, like when you graduate from law school, you are an idiot. I don't care where you finish in your class, like, you don't know anything. And I'm not exempting myself from that at all. Like when you walk into a courtroom, you literally don't know where to stand.
Super funny, because like we when we hire 1 and 2 and 3Ls, like part of why because we recruit a lot from the colleges near us. One of the reasons they love working with us is we bring them with to these things. Yeah. They're like, they're like the only ones in their class that have done this.
Yeah. And so it's super helpful, right? Because there's a lot of practical knowledge that you just don't have that you're learning, right? It's like, you've got to learn how to prep. You've got to learn all the rules. You've got to learn how to deal with clients. You've got to learn how to interview a client. You've got to learn how to watch a judge's face and be like, it's time for me to shut up. Yep. You know what I mean? Like you've got to learn all of those things, right? Like, so it is the beginning, it is literally the beginning. And that's the way I think people need to think about it, right? And it's the beginning of a great thing, because you could be the best litigator that anybody's ever seen. You could be a wonderful business owner, right? Here's another big piece of advice. I'm going to use this language not to offend anybody, but fuck what you're interested in. I believe that people really, truly like go after what they're interested in. I believe it's like a misnomer, because to me, if you want to be happy, right, you need to think about what you want your day to look like that makes you happy. Because a lot of times what you're interested in and what make you happy don't coexist, right? And so like, I'll give you an example. I was never interested in bankruptcy. Like I have no interest in bankruptcy. I still don't really have an interest in bankruptcy. Like when we do a shit ton of bankruptcy. What happened was I was doing probates and estates, and I was litigating all over the state of Arkansas. My wife's a CPA, or she still is a CPA, but she used to do M&A for one of the big 4. And so we'd be sitting, and we had 2 kids at this time, I think maybe 3. We have 4 now. And we'd be sitting at home on like a Tuesday, and she'd get a phone call, and she was like, hey, I've got to go do this deal in Kansas. I got to leave Thursday. And I'm like, well, fuck, I got a trial 2 hours away on Thursday. Who's getting the kids from school? And it's like, so like a lot of that chaos was happening. So the bankruptcy courthouse is like directly between my office and my home. I would never have to leave Little Rock. And so I was like, I'm going to become a bankruptcy lawyer, right? It had nothing to do with it was literally like, this is going to satisfy my family. Right. Which actually made me a happier human. I think when somebody thinks, what do I want to be when I grow up? They should think, what do I want my day to look like? Right. Right. Because it's like, if you want to be a business owner, if you want to own your own law firm and you don't like data and financial reports, it's probably a terrible idea.
And risk and long hours and
numbers. And so I really think people should and that's not just for lawyers, but like, but it's like, you hear people that are super interested in family law but don't want to go to court. That doesn't exist. Or as far as I know, you may have a secret, but like, no, if you're doing family law, you're a litigator, right? Yeah. And so like, just to think about where for instance, like I tried my hand at estate planning. I cannot do repetitive things over and over.
Yeah.
Very bad for me. You know what I mean? So like I would schedule days where I would just have like I would deliver estate plans. And so it's like the 8th time that day I've explained the trust to someone. And I'm just like, oh my God. Like, but somebody else may find a ton of joy in that. And so that to me is like, really just think about when I grow up, what do I want my day to look like? And then find something that meshes as well as you can with that.
Yeah.
Regardless of the practice area or the title or whatever else.
You mentioned creating work-life balance, and we kind of like detest that word here at our business because we feel like it's not real. Like
it's not. When I say it, what I mean is you can make a good living without working 85 hours a week.
It's more like what you were talking about before. Like, how do you integrate your life well, where you can be a great husband and a father and a part of your community, lawyer and a business owner? It's like that's possible. It's just like, how are you going to integrate your time? Like work, because like if you overdo work, all these other things aren't going to look very good, and you're going to be way worse at work because now the wife and the kids and everybody else is not happy with you.
Right. Well, it's like even when I didn't have it figured out as well, and we were growing it, which of course everybody knows when you're growing a law firm, be prepared to make $7 an hour, right? Because you're going to work 95 hours a week. But what I would do, which just worked, right? Because at one point my wife was like, "I need you home at 5:30," and I was like, "Okay. I will give you 5:30 till the kids go to bed." He's like, okay. And so every night at home at 5:30, kids went to bed, I was back at work.
Yeah.
But that was our, it wasn't work-life balance. It was like, I'm going to be, as far as my kids know, I was home and not working, as far as they knew, I was there and present and dealing with them. But like, I was still working a bunch of hours. It just wasn't working those hours between 5:30 and 8:30. You have to figure those things out, right? Which I'm not advising anybody do that. I'm just saying you might have to.
This was incredible. I really appreciate it. Would love to have you back on and explore some of these topics a little deeper.
Thank you guys a lot. It was great to meet everybody.